Hey everyone, happy Wednesday. Welcome to another Words of Wisdom Wednesday, Words with Yoda episode. So today I am going to talk to us a little bit about a couple things that I have made videos about before and how it ties into this practical example that I'm going to talk about so that we can kind of build on some of the things that I've talked about before, and then how do we apply that in our practical life? So if you have seen the video, and if not, I of course highly recommend it. If you've seen the video about our images in terms of our lens, the color of our lens, I believe is the title, and it talks about how we can have our lens be influenced. Where you're not seeing clearly, where you have a shade of blue and everything is blue, or a shade of red and everything will be red. So catch that video if you haven't, and I'm going to a little bit expand on that, because just as that video talked about certain biases that we might be having, certain emotions that might be clouding our vision, I am going to take it a little bit further and talk about how that creates an image. And this can be not just in general. So I talked about in that last video about how some of those lenses come from core beliefs. And then in that case, they're usually applicable to everything. And today I'm going to expand on it a little bit and talk about just our images. And what I mean in particular is when, or how we can apply this is how we perceive things. What images that we have of a thing, person, our feelings of our relationship with him, our boss and what we think our boss thinks of us, our husband, our best friend, our kids, whatever image that we have of that person is going to be our lens about that person. So that's why it's key to watch that lens video, okay? But essentially, if I have an image, a particular image for a person, so this person's image to me, my perception of this person is, let's say, I'm judging them that they're flaky, unreliable, and full of shit. We'll just say. Then I get a text message, so this is a practical example. I get a text message from that person telling me they got a flat tire and they're going to be a half hour late. Since I have an image already determined, which is essentially my lens about that person, everything they say and do, I'm going to think is bullshit. Because I have an image of them. Take the exact same circumstances. Somebody else that you have a different image about texts you and says that they're flat tire and they'll be 30 minutes late. Your thoughts about it, how you handle it, how you respond to it, all the things are not determined necessarily on the event. Usually it's determined on your image of that person. It's not determined necessarily on the event. So do you know how in another video that I talked about making things mean things? So we're automatically making things mean things based on what our images are, what our core beliefs are, what color our lens is, and we are interpreting that information, which is what encompasses our perception. Have you ever heard somebody say, perception is the truth? Your perception is the truth to you, and it very much is. The way that I perceive things is the truth to me. And so we're usually searching for things that are going to validate what we already think is true. We usually find what we're looking for. So if we want to be validated that this person is a dirtbag, then we're going to see all their dirtbag qualities. It's all going to stand out. We're going to interpret everything they do as more dirtbag tendencies, because that's confirming our image of that person. Either what we believe on our own, what we've made it mean and now believe about them. We have these beliefs, and sometimes they're tied to those core beliefs that I talk about in the lens video. Sometimes, but I'm more talking about in this case how this could practically happen. How people have misinterpretations in text message, for example, written text of the words instead of a voice text or other things. They are misinterpreted all the time. And ask yourself, why is it that we are misinterpreting those messages? Is it because we can't convey through text? No. It's because we have so many mixed images and mixed opinions of people. So many things that we're now judging about people. And whatever your image, to be nice about it or to not, and to say whatever your judgments are about people, is going to be how you receive and perceive all of the data that comes across from them. Their energy, their thoughts, their actions, they're all the things. And so here's a couple action steps that we can do to improve this. Number one, if you have a bunch of terrible images of people, really mitigate those people's interaction with you. There are some people that's not an option, right? If something is, and this is another video I'll talk about, avoidable, unnecessary. They're like my two big things that I really harp on with anybody that will listen. Okay. But for today, I'll talk about it as if all the people are not avoidable. Like if this is your boss or whoever it is that you have a negative image of. Notice yourself having a negative image of a person and having that interpret your perception or dictate your perception, I mean. Notice if and when you would respond to someone else entirely differently. So pretend, give yourself a little role play, okay? That is if you received that text message that you're kind of like, what is this person saying? If you have something like that, then tell yourself it came from somebody else and see how you would react. If you would find it to be so unreasonable, if you think their excuse is such nonsense, if you feel like they're lying to you, or the other way around, right? Let's say you're being really too forgiving with a person because your image, sometimes we're being taken advantage of because people have really, really great images. We have a great image of a person, so we don't want to believe XYZ. We don't want to believe they're lying to us. We don't want to interpret and perceive the things that they're doing in a negative way because we think highly of them. We have a good image of them. So then everything they do and all the things that come up having to do with them, we think highly of because we think highly of them. So I encourage you to mix and match sometimes when you're getting certain data or certain stories or certain conflict maybe, and ask yourself if you would be handling it different if you had a different image of that person. Compare if it was somebody else and the same situation and you have a different image of that person. Compare if maybe I wouldn't overreact, maybe I wouldn't be so mad, or maybe I would be a lot more upset. Then maybe I should be, holding a little more responsible for this, or, so part of it is really just about turning our lights on to being more mindful of these implicit biases that we have all the time, right? So if I know and love my best dear friend and they leave my message, this is a good way in business even, right? So I'm a network marketing professional, and in messages, right? Here's a really good way to where it doesn't have to be somebody you're close to. It could be some random person. And these aren't just your images on that person necessarily, but your ones in general. So here's an example. If I reach out to somebody and I'm offering them a service, or I'm trying to help them out, or doing some follow-up, which is something that's a weakness of mine, right? It's a work in progress. If I'm doing that and they don't respond to me, the little red message is there and then they left me on red, and I see that, I have a couple decisions I can make. I can interpret that like they're not interested whatsoever in my product and they want me to kick rocks. I can decide that. I can decide the opening the message was an accident, happens to me all the time, and they didn't even get to read my message and maybe I should write them again. Or they got busy, they'll write me back. There's so many decisions that we are inadvertently making. You're not mindlessly, we are making all these decisions just now, and it could be something as silly as her 2-year-old picked up her phone and Facebook opened it up on the message and she never even saw it. But now also think, if it's your really good friend, if that's my really good friend and they left me on red, I'm not going to make that mean anything. I'm going to write them back in an hour and be like, hey girl, did you see my message? Right? Because I already have the confidence and trust in the image of that person, my bestie. I know that she's not ignoring me. I'm not going to make it mean that. I know that she's not blowing me off. I'm not going to make it mean that. So know what you know. Stick with what we know. There's a Don't Make It Mean Anything video, so I encourage you to check that one out also. But if we're not making it mean, if we're not making things mean things and we're letting it rest on its own, then on its own is just that person either didn't actually get to see my message because Facebook plays games on Messenger. They either didn't see my message or they couldn't respond at that time. That's all it actually means on its own. Doesn't mean they're not interested, doesn't mean they're blowing you off, doesn't mean all the rest of that. And if we think a negative thing about that person, like, oh, this chick, she's just, if you start to notice your mind and your thoughts going in that type of way, like you're about to decide and label a story onto something that isn't based in any reality or fact at all, catch yourself doing that. And do the trick of compare if it was somebody else. So I do this to myself when I want to overcome my own, sometimes maybe confidence struggles. And I'll reach out to a person and left me on red, or I don't know, for whatever reason, I might want to make that mean they're blowing me off, or if I just want an excuse to back out of the conversation, then I'll make some excuse, right? So what I could do instead, and what I do instead, is consider as if it was my best friend. If I sent that message to my best friend and my best friend didn't reply, am I going to be offended? Am I going to never talk to that person again or feel ghosted because one message? No. Or if in a text message, somebody maybe is shouting at you, or they're speaking in a way that you're like, what is going on? Like, don't take that personal. Don't make it mean anything about you or your relationship with them. Consider all the rest of the things. Consider maybe they just aren't familiar with certain text etiquette. Maybe they accidentally have a jam on the all caps button. And if you notice that you're having a lot of misunderstandings or you're being misinterpreted over text message frequently, I would encourage you to use a voice text. I use voice text because I have hundreds of messages a day. So for me, I had to get over the fear of using the voice text. For me, it made me uncomfortable. I mean, I was to the point where I wouldn't even answer the door if the pizza guy came. So I have severe anxiety, and a lot of other things that sometimes prohibit me from feeling comfortable enough to call and talk on the phone. And that's why a lot of people do text, right? There's this comfort of the anonymity behind the phone and the words, and the ability to take our time to select the words and go back and edit and spell check and all these things to make the message there. But if our message isn't coming across effectively, or maybe we have negative images of others and we're perceiving their messages in a negative way, then I encourage you to use the little microphone button. On Facebook Messenger, it's 1 minute at a time. Same with Instagram. And you push it. Luckily, Facebook Messenger, you just push it. You don't have to hold it down. And you talk for up to 1 minute at a time, and it sends them a little voice message, like a little voicemail, 1 minute at a time. And so if you notice, like, oh man, maybe they think I'm blowing them off, I use emojis a lot because I have a fear of being misunderstood. It's one of my kind of core things. I really don't want to be misunderstood. I want to make sure I over-explain all that. And so part of what helps me is also using emojis, because I want to make sure people know I'm not being a passive aggressive, or I'm not mad or whatever. And now for time's sake, it's really usually necessary for me to be using those voice texts anyway, because I can't type out these super long things to dozens, if not hundreds of messages. And so I use voice text. But what I love about it is then people don't have to as much, right? They still can't see my face, but they don't have to as much interpret what I mean by things. And so part of it is our image, that we have to check that. We have to see, well, would I be reacting the same way if this was so-and-so? Do I have a negative image of this person and that's making me perceive everything about them in a tainted, biased, negative way? Ask yourself that. So that's part of how you can check yourself. Also, you can be avoiding and eliminating people that you have negative thoughts and feelings about, right? So that's also another one that, but avoidance isn't always a solution. So sometimes it's just proactive. You can avoid things. And then the other thing is to go a step further and make sure that certain communications have more data so that you're leaving less for interpretation. So if you feel like you're consistently misinterpreting, or people are misinterpreting you, try to throw some emojis in your chat. If you're cringed at that, then try to voice text a little bit more, or even a short little video clip so they can see and hear you. And I think this will avoid some misinterpretations. It will also give our light on to ways that we could be coming across and ways that people are coming across to us, and that a lot of it really is how we see that person. So if we see that person as a jerk, then we're going to feel like they're being a jerk to us. We find what we're looking for. So usually we're trying to find information that's either confirming things we already believe and think and know, or disproving things that we don't believe in. So if it's funny when we can use Google for anything we want to now, right? And when people say that they're doing research, and it's really just, I'm going to go to Google and I'm going to try to find something that confirms what I already believe, is what a lot of people do. And our mind does the same thing with our relationships with others. If you think your boss is overworking you and you're underappreciated, then when he genuinely has a horrible time in his life going on and he accidentally forgets your birthday, you're not going to forgive him because you already feel all these other ways about him. Whereas if it was somebody else, you would totally be like, no, blah, blah, blah. And so part of it is just recognizing our own biases, and that they're coming from images that we already have determined about people. And sometimes those images are fair and warranted, and sometimes they aren't. And so if we can examine them and cross-reference them with other, I guess, control samples, the way we do in science, and see, are you being fair? Are you interpreting things as they are? Are you making it mean anything? What color is your lens? I hope these things help you all. I hope you're having a great week so far. And I'll talk to you soon. Another episode of Words of Wisdom Wednesday, Words with Yoda. Thank you so much for watching. Love and light to you all.